Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews and to another chatty wrap-up. It is my November wrap-up, so I'm going to be talking about everything that I read in November in a fairly casual way. I don't know how to more convey casualness than this. Hi, I am drinking salted caramel gingerbread tea, and it is the bomb. I am fully in Christmas spirit mode. Festivities all round. Speaking of things that are all round, I am surrounded by books on all sides. My reading room is just everything I need to go to the book bank. But we aren't going to talk about that. We're going to be casual and think about the books that I read, and it's very exciting. I have Goodreads up to tell me exactly what I read this month. I'm thinking about switching away from Goodreads next year. Do you use any other way to track your reading? Let me know. 27 books read in... I think said October, in November. 27 books read. It's really good. Some of them are very short. I think there's like 4 novellas in here, but still really pleased with how the reading went. There was a lot of short stuff actually, and I'm going to take you through it in not exactly chronological order because some things have gone out of order, but in enough of a chronological order that you'll get a vague sense. If you want true chronologicalness, then you'll have to watch my vlogs. Ding! This is The Sun's Devices by Rebecca Levine, but I'm holding this up as a representation of all 3 books in the Hollow Gods series. So this is a fantasy series that has had quite a big gap between the publication of the original 2 books and now the 3rd book. So the 2nd book came out in 2015, I think, and obviously now it's 2020 and this is out. And I reread books 1 and 2. I read them in 2017, I think, and I bought them on Kindle and I reread them this month. And overall, I have to say this is an interesting series. It wouldn't be on any of my kind of like must-read fantasy lists, but I think if you're interested in very specific things, this might be interesting to you, like worlds where magic is kind of lost, that kind of thing. Very dark, very sex-focused is probably the nicest way to put it. In the original 2, which would have come out at kind of the height of Game of Thrones-ness, is my opinion. This 3rd book is a little bit more mellow, but I think it suffers from that and the story isn't as interesting. So it wasn't my favourite, but I did have a good time reading all 3 books. I still don't know if this is the last book in this series, because it ends in a way that could imply later books, but I couldn't see any information about that online. So if you know, let me know. But yeah, I would not wholeheartedly recommend it unless you have them already and you kind of fancied reading them, or you pick them up from your library, which is where I got them originally. If I read the whole series a few years ago, I probably would have had a much more harder time with it, that's the word I'm looking for, just because I wasn't in a fantasy mindset at all. Like anything, even adjacent to grimdark, just made me miserable, and this didn't do that. So either that's me as a reader or that's this series. Let's start making stacks that fall down. Then I had my reread of Turning Darkness into Light by Marie Brennan. This is a spin-off novel from the Natural History of Dragons books. We're 2 generations down, we're following her granddaughter, and I love this book. It's been on this channel since the very beginning. It was in the first ever vlog that I ever did. It is so exceptional. I love this book. I think there are probably a few things that are not so great about it. Like, I don't know about the representation of the main character. I'm not the best authority to speak on that, but this has dragons, archaeology, the translation of dead languages, the ethics of archaeology. I feel like I've talked about this book way too many times, but basically it's Judith Catnip, and I love it so much, and I will have a dedicated review coming out for it in the new year. Burning Roses. This is a novella, obviously. It's very short. It's one of the tour novellas that I treated myself to in an order from Portal Books in October, and it is so good. It is a blending of Western fairy tale and I believe Chinese mythology? Yes, Chinese and European folktales. And I didn't know anything about the Chinese side because my knowledge of Chinese folktale is not great, but it has since prompted me to go and do some busy bee research into it and look at some stuff, and I think any book that does that for me is really good. So we have these 2 middle-aged protagonists who are travelling together, trying to get their lives back together, and they are chasing a sunbird, and it's a really small story in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of stuff about forgiveness, and yeah, I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it. This was an exceptional novella. It was probably a 4-star for me. I think I just wanted a little bit more out of it, but I wonder if reading it again now, knowing more of the mythology, I would have a better time. So that is on my reevaluate on a reread kind of list. If you hear any noises, it is Katie having a shower. The next one of those short books that I read was Upright Women Wanted by Sarah Gailey. Again, this is another novella. This is so good. It is the future American South, and it's a horrible patriarchal society, dystopia, women are not allowed to do things, etc, etc. And we have this main character who runs away from home to join the librarians, who are, on the surface, women who travel from place to place distributing appropriate materials. And she goes to join them because her best friend and definitely lover has just been killed for possessing non-legitimate materials. And so she goes to join the librarians, but discovers that all is not what it seems, and maybe they are a bit of a different organisation than she thought they were. And this was a 5-star novella for me. This was so good. This is everything I want in a novella, everything that I want in a book. I need to read everything Sarah Gailey has ever written. Oh, it's so good. If I was going to prompt you to go and pick one book from this to read, I might pick Upright Women Wanted. I know novellas are stupid expensive, but it would be high up on my list. Still on the reading shorter books kick that I was on at the beginning of the month, I read City of Ghosts and Tunnel of Bones by V. Schwab. These were both rereads. This is her Cassidy Blake series. It is middle grade. It's about a young girl called Cassidy who can see ghosts, and she has a ghost best friend. And the first book is kind of her discovering what it means to have that power and what she ought to be doing with it. And the second book, which is set in Paris, first one set in Edinburgh, second one, which is set in Paris, is a continuation of that story. And they're both, it's the middle grade thing of you could read the stories individually and they would still make sense. There is a little bit of meta plot. I think there will be more later on. I was reading these as part of my last chance TBR as to whether I wanted to hang on to them or not, and I've decided I'm going to unhaul Tunnel of Bones because it didn't do as much for me, but actually rereading City of Ghosts, I really enjoyed it, and I think I probably will try and read the other books in this series. I'm just going to try and find them from the library rather than purchasing them. And last of my short books binge that I did on, I think, a Sunday afternoon when I had a headache, I reread Night Flights by Philip Reeve, and this is in the same universe. It's the short stories in the universe of Mortal Engines, but I think it's Anna Fong who is the kind of aviatrix character, and I love this character, I love this world. I did try and watch the film. I've read all the books, but I did try and watch the film last week, the week before, and I couldn't get through it. Not because the visuals aren't stunning. It's a beautiful film, but I got annoyed at Hester throughout, and the writing is some of the worst writing I've ever seen for a film. The book's wonderful. The writing of the screenplay is just bad, and I will hear no other opinions whatsoever. It's badly written. But this is not badly written. This is absolutely lovely. I am hanging on to this. It's a really nice collection of short stories. Do I want to own all of the books in these covers? Yes, I do. Can I justify that expense? No, I cannot. If you haven't encountered Mortal Engines before, imagine a world where most cities have become traction cities, so they are up on wheels or tracks or whatever, and they roll around the continent trying to eat other cities, and it's called Municipal Darwinism, which is hilarious and wonderful and so smart, and they are really action-packed, really, really good, upper level, middle grade, I'd say, and I had a really great time reading them. I think I read them all from the library a couple of years ago, and they are really fun to read. Another book from my Portal Books haul, I finally read Mexican Gothic. Oh, it's so good. We have this main character, Noemi, who goes to try and see what's going on with her cousin, who's acting a little bit odd and sending strange letters from her enormous out in the middle of nowhere house that she lives in with her new husband. And she gets there, and basically it's Gothic horror at its finest. This book is so creepy, and I don't read a lot of horror. I think this is the only horror book I've read this year, and this knocked my socks off. It's so good. I thought that some of the fantasy elements, or the more kind of fantasy horror elements, when they came in, I thought they were going to read really clunky, but actually they fit in with the book perfectly. I thought this was fantastic. It lived up to every expectation I had based on everyone who'd recommended it to me. Yes, loved it. I'm thinking about giving Gods of Jade and Shadow a second chance because I like this so much. Then I read my copy of Raybearer, which I had on Kindle because it was on sale and everyone and their mum had been talking about it. So I'm imagining you've probably already heard about this on BookTube, but if not, it is such a good YA. Raybearer is an absolutely fantastic story. It's kind of YA tropes, but it's so different as a YA story. Like, where the beats of the story fall is really powerful. I really liked the different relationships that build throughout the book. I really liked the plot, so this idea of a person who's joining the prince's retinue and she really wants to be a part of it, but also is fully aware that she will do bad things if that happens. It's just, I don't want to explain too much about it because I really think it's one to read for yourself. So that's another one that I would definitely recommend reading. After that, I read a couple of review copies. I had a review copy of Fable by Adrian Young. This is what it looks like. This is coming out in January, and this really surprised me. I wasn't a huge fan of The Girl the Sea Gave Back. It just didn't do anything for me. This was the kind of fun YA that I really enjoy. So we have this main character, Fable, who's been dropped off on this island full of thieves and terrible people by her father, and he's basically said, if you can get yourself back on your own, then I will take you back into my kind of guild of terrible people. And so Fable's main aim is to get away and get back to her father, and so we start the book with her having enough that she can just about get away, and she joins the crew of this ship and sails off to meet her father. But it's such a found family book. There's a romance element to it. It's really fast, and it's a lot of kind of like, this feels like a terribly quick way to develop any kind of relationship, romantic or otherwise, but there we go. I just had a really good time with it. It was a fast-paced YA read. It was mostly set at sea, you know how I love the sea. Yes, I enjoyed it greatly. And then the other review copy I read this month, I think that's the only other review copy I read, yes, was The Mask Falling by Samantha Shannon. This is the fourth book in the Bone Season series. So we have 3 main books, a couple of novellas. I did read the novella that falls in the middle on another month. I can't remember when I read it, but I am up to date with the Bone Season. Mask Falling, I won't go into too much detail because if you haven't read the series, it won't matter at all to you. But I will say that I thought it was pretty good. If one of the things you don't like about the Bone Season is that Samantha Shannon likes to beat up the main character just consistently. She is in pain, being hurt emotionally, physically. There is more of that in this book than I think in the other 3. So if that's not what you like, then this is the time to put the series away. You don't need to read it. But if you don't mind that or you enjoy that aspect of it, then that's for you. I had a pretty good time reading it. I was expecting to really dislike it. I found it very compelling to read, but very difficult to read. After that, another book that has definitely done the rounds of BookTube, but for good reasons. This is Legendborn. This is so good. This is a YA book. It's very, very tropey, but I think that's kind of what makes it great. So we have Bree, who is attending early college, which I think was a really interesting way of setting it, because it means you have these quite young characters, but in a very transitioning into the adult world kind of setting. So I thought that was interesting. And she ends up discovering a kind of magic, and there's a lot of ties to King Arthur in here, and I don't want to go into too much detail. There's a lot to discover of this, and I just thought this was fun. More than anything else, I thought this was fun and really well written. I really liked the characters. I liked the perspective of it. I thought that was really interesting. Yes, I think I said it in my vlog, but this is kind of what I wanted the Mortal Instruments to be. Mortal Engines. Mortal Instruments is the demon hunting one. That's kind of what I wanted. This is what I wanted that to be. Pause for a tea break here at this point. After that, I think I read Animorphs. It was either Animorphs 12 or 13. I think it was 12. And that video is up if you want to go and watch it and hear my thoughts. It was a pretty good one. It involves allergies in an interesting way. But yeah, you should go watch it. That's all I'll say about Animorphs. After that was my reread of Song of Wraiths and Ruin by Rosaria Brown. This is another YA book. We have 2 characters who have very different end goals that both involve the other. This is a really good book. I was surprised to not have got much more out of it on a reread, just because that's normally how it happens. If you're a YA fan, I think this would be a really good addition to your shelf or wherever you choose to read from. I think it's a really fun story, goes to some dark places, wanted a bit more magic, but I'm hoping that the sequel will really make or break that. Then I read the 3 books that Asha, lovely Asha, who I will link below, lent me. I read Brownie and Roses, which is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but the beauty character is like a gardener. This is phenomenal. If you want a Beauty and the Beast retelling, this is the one you should read. That and maybe Bookish and the Beast, just for pure contrast. They're probably my favourite Beauty and the Beast retellings. This is so good, so well written, the voice is wonderful, the setting, the way that the Beast and the Beauty's relationship develops. Oh, it's really, really good. Another one I would wholeheartedly recommend. Then I read The Wolf of the Water by Josie Jeffrey. Reminder that I know Josie in real life. That's my disclosure of potential bias. But actually, I wasn't a super huge fan of this one. I like her other books a lot more. I think this was sort of a clash of interests. I'm not super into the setting, and there wasn't enough of a kind of hook to keep me interested. I will probably read the later books in the series, but I am much more keen for the next book in her Seekers series. I like the vampires. I'm less keen on the Atlantis. And lastly, books loaned to me by Asha, I read Queen of Coin and Whispers, and I knew I was going to love this, and I adored this. This is a queen and her spy master, and it's sapphic and just so good. The politics is amazing. The kind of floundering of a new ruler is really powerfully written in this, and I would definitely think that you should read this if you haven't already. Add it to your list. It is great. Then I read Joanne Harris's Roomlight, and this is the sequel to Rune Marks. So we have basically the kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Resurrection, I guess, of the Viking gods in a world. Joanne Harris has 4 books that are set in this kind of universe, but one of them, The Gospel of Loki, is just a retelling of Viking myth. And while I think this is pretty well written, it isn't for me. I don't know what it is. I can't really connect to this world. I don't really connect to the characters. I think that Loki is done well in the Testament of Loki and in the Gospel of Loki, but as a kind of high stakes character in this, I wasn't wild about it. And I think there's also something about reading, this is a personal preference thing, I know it's part of the plot, but I don't like reading a sheltered female character who gets taken advantage of. That's just not what I like to read. It doesn't feel super empowering to me, and I get that it's part of the story, but it just wasn't my thing. I am unhauling that. Then I reread These Rebel Waves by Sarah Rush, and I actually did enjoy this the second time around. A world with plant magic, we have these kind of, it's like a big basin, so lots of islands, lots of streams going to places, and in this world, a lot of people striving to gain control of resources. There's a lot of religion versus older religion kind of stuff going on. The reason I'm getting rid of this, despite having pretty much enjoyed it the second time around, I didn't love the sequel. I read it earlier in the year, I think, and it just didn't grab me, and I think this is the kind of book where it doesn't quite stand completely on its own because it ends on a cliffhanger, so I'm going to say goodbye to it. But if you like revolution kind of books with multiple POVs, a lot of romance, I think that's probably all I need to say. But if you like that kind of thing, you'll probably like this. I wasn't crazy about it. I have read her other series, the Frost Made of Night series, the Ice Magic one, and that is silly good YA fun. This is a little bit, takes itself a tiny bit too seriously, I think, is probably my criticism. Then I reread Nocturna. This is another YA, so much YA this month. I liked this well enough. I wasn't crazy about it. What's interesting about this one, and I talked about it in my vlog, is that it takes place over a really short period of time. There's like 3 days encompassed in this entire book, and some characters do, in fact, form a romantic attachment in that time, and I get that a lot happens to them, but when you really think about it that way, that's quite intense. I really like the idea behind it, and I really like the magic. There's kind of like a main magic and a sub-magic, and everyone has different magical skill sets, which is 100% things that I enjoy. I just didn't think this was particularly strong, and it's not something that I'm going to want to reread, and that is my criteria for keeping a book. Oh, we're on to Insomnia kicked in. I read Unravel the Dusk. This is the sequel to Spin the Dawn, which I do own. Magical Tailor, YA. This is a sequel, so I can't talk too much about it, but if you read the first one and you enjoyed it, I think you will probably like the second. As with a lot of YA sequels, it takes the Taylor aspect of the first book and kind of downplays it, but it came into play more often than I thought it was going to do and that I would have expected for a YA sequel. So if you were wondering about picking up these books and seeing if the second book stood up, it does. It's a pretty enjoyable sequel. I believe it's a duology, so it's now complete, and I would say if you're into it and you're willing to read it with the critical eye that quite a lot of people with disabilities pointed out after the first book came out, then it is a pretty good series to read. You just have to bear some things in mind. I think I've got some original things about Spin the Dawn probably nearer the beginning of the year, I think. After that, I reread Slayer Unchosen by Kirsten White. These are her 2 Buffy the Vampire Slayer books, as in they are in that universe. They do not feature Buffy very often. I had a reasonably good time rereading these. I think Chosen is nowhere near as strong. It has a couple of really good story moments, but it's not strong overall in terms of plot, and the characters who are kind of antagonistic get kind of annoying quite fast. So I am hanging on to my copy of Slayer because I did definitely enjoy this. Every time I talk about these books, I talk about how I know enough Buffy to get by, but I am nowhere near a die-hard fan. That is how I read these books, and I think they are pretty solid. I think the writing gets a little bit slow at times, but I think that's a stylistic thing. As with the Cassidy Blake books, I am planning on keeping reading this series, I just don't think I'm going to be buying them. After that, I reread Wild Savage Stars. This is the sequel to Sweet Black Waves. It's a Tristan and Isolde retelling. I haven't loved this series overall, it just kind of bores me. It is one of those series where if you find it irritating when people who could easily solve their problems by just having a conversation don't do that, then this book will annoy you. And I am absolutely 100% one of those people, so it just sort of bothered me. It's a lot of pining. It's not badly written, it's just not particularly exciting. And I am in a time of life where I require excitement, so yes, I'm saying farewell to this one as well. So I got rid of a fair amount of that Last Chance TBR, to be honest. The last book I read was The Mistwick School for Music Craft, I believe that's what it's called. Yes, and this was another 3 a.m. read, because insomnia. So this is a cheery middle grade book. Young girl wants to go to school to learn music craft, which is basically magic, but you make magic by playing music. And she flubs her audition, but manages to get in through various things that is quite plot relevant, so I probably shouldn't express it. And she has to kind of like find her place in this school. It's that traditional middle grade private school kind of read. It was perfectly enjoyable. I really liked the moments where we got to see what this world that functions on music craft was like, and I would like to see more of that in future books if I read them. I don't know if I will, but yeah, it was perfectly enjoyable. Little middle grade. As someone who doesn't read a lot of middle grade, it reminded me a lot of the School for Good and Evil books, but a little bit less funny and a bit more, oddly a bit more real world, despite the fact that it takes place in a fantasy world. What was funny to me is that I was reading it on the library app on my phone, and I have it set to dark mode so I can read at night, and all the pictures were inverted, so they all looked terrifying because of this strange, like, weird colour balancing. It was very odd, terrifying images of what are probably very nice illustrations in the actual book. So those are my 27 books for November of 2020. I'm really pleased with how this went. I read down my TBR, it was wonderful, and I read some really, really good stuff. Recommendations from friends who never let me down, stuff that I bought myself that was all wonderfully justified purchasing. I read a lot of the books that were on my, I say a lot of, I think 3 of the books that were on my books I missed in 2020 video. Yeah, I had a really good month. What else can I say? It's been good. I highly recommend Novellas for if you just want to feel a sense of achievement. Right, I'm going to go because it is actually lunchtime and I need to get back to work. So, thank you so much for watching. Comment below with your favourite book that you've read this month or your least favourite book that you've read this month. I want to know what not to read. That's, if anything, more important to me. While you're down there, you can also follow me on all of my social media. I am tiptoeing back into Twitter. I'm trying not to let it absorb my whole life. You can also subscribe because it makes me feel loved and appreciated. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. I really should have stacked these in order. This may have been a mistake. Alright, so the next... Title this video, Judith struggling to pull books off her shelf for 30 minutes. Women Wanted by... Please stop falling down. Everyone on BookTube has already talked about. Please be quiet. So we have this main character whose name I can't even remember. It's Fable, it's the main character's name.